Every American knows that the attic is the scariest place in the house, as it is an enclosed area filled with dust, mold, and sometimes even rats and snakes. The main character in this story is Jimmy, who is currently 6 years old and has two younger siblings, Peter and Joy, aged 5 and 4 respectively. On a fine day, Peter and Joy tricked Jimmy into going to the attic and locked him inside. At first, Jimmy felt okay, but as time passed, he began to feel uneasy. Minutes turned into hours, and his uneasiness grew into anxiety, and eventually, he was consumed by fear. Jimmy's imagination began to run wild, and every shadow or scuttling noise made him jump. As day turned to night, darkness crept into the attic, and Jimmy's hope turned to desperation. He started clawing at the attic door that led to the house, scratching and clawing until his fingers were bloody. Feeling desperate, Jimmy began to pray, saying that he would do anything to get out of the attic. Suddenly, a voice rang in his head, offering to help him escape in exchange for 3 tasks. Jimmy agreed to the voice's terms. As for the task, Jimmy will know when the time came. As soon as the agreement was made, the attic door opened, and Jimmy ran back to his room. Time has really flown by, and 10 years have passed since the attic incident when Jimmy was 6. On Jimmy's birthday, a voice rang in his head, urging him to seek revenge and deal with Peter. The voice told Jimmy that it would teach him how to concoct a strong sedative that could numb the victim's senses. It took Jimmy 3 days to prepare the sedative. The opportunity arose when Jimmy's parents decided to take a short trip for the long weekend. As soon as they left, Jimmy put his plan into action. He lured Peter to the attic, and as they arrived, he stabbed Peter in the neck with a syringe filled with sedative. As the needle penetrated, he injected the sedative into Peter, causing him to slump to the ground. Jimmy sprang into action, starting by cutting off Peter's hand, then moving on to his forearm, shoulder, legs, and thighs. It took Jimmy 3 hours to dismember Peter, and finally, he cut off his head, placing it into a worn tennis bag. Jimmy placed the body parts into the rubbish bin as soon as the dump truck arrived, and watched as it drove off with them. The second part of his plan involved forging Peter's handwriting and writing a letter to his parents, informing them that he had left home to explore the world. Having completed these tasks, Jimmy went to take a bath. When Peter's parents received the letter, they were initially saddened by the news, but eventually came to terms with it, knowing that it had always been Peter's dream to travel the world. Soon enough, things returned to normal. In the last letter sent by Jimmy on behalf of Peter to his parents, he mentioned that Peter was in South America and he was thrilled about exploring the Amazonian forest. He also stated that he would be out of contact for at least a month. When Jimmy's parents received the letter, Jimmy knew that it was time to confront Joy. Joy has always harbored a deep dislike for Jimmy because they were not born by the same father, so dealing with her would be challenging. However, an opportunity presented itself when Joy introduced her boyfriend Jason to the family. Jason enjoys drinking and likes to show off his car by racing it. He often boasts that he is the fastest driver in town. Jimmy taunts Jason into a race along a straight road leading up to a railway track, with the loser forfeiting their car and being labeled a loser at school. Joy accepts the bet on Jason's behalf, knowing he is the best driver in town and wanting to see Jimmy lose. On the day of the race, both cars speed towards the railway track, neck to neck on the straight road. When they are just 50 meters away from the track, Jimmy suddenly slams on his brakes, causing his car to screech loudly. Jason assumes Jimmy has chickened out and won the race, until he realizes a train is coming. Despite trying to brake, Jason's car does not slow down, and he crashes into the track. The train rammed into Jason's car, causing his car to split in two and catch fire in nearby bushes. Joy, who is trapped in the car with Jason, screams as the tragedy unfolds, her cries fading away after a few minutes. After throwing the wire cutter into the bush opposite the accident, Jimmy drove off to the town center to collect a cake for his parents' wedding anniversary. Once he had collected the cake, he immediately drove back home. When he arrived, his mother was preparing dinner and the evening news was reporting on a train crash. Jimmy set the cake on the dining table and went to his room. Before leaving, he informed his parents that Joy had gone to the movies and had asked them not to wait for her. He also mentioned that he had just eaten and was not hungry at the moment, asking him not to wait for him either since it was their special day. Jimmy waited in his room for about an hour before heading to the kitchen, where he found his parents both unconscious. He then tied John and Macy to kitchen chairs and went to the garage to retrieve the nail gun that his dad used for fixing small items. Jimmy placed John's hand on the table, positioned the nail gun over his fingers, and unloaded the nails, firing one into each finger. He repeated this process until all 10 fingers had a nail in them. After completing this gruesome act, Jimmy then placed the nail gun on John's eye and fired, killing him instantly. Jimmy turned to his mom and picked up the hammer from the garage. He began hammering Macy's head without knowing how long he continued. He stopped only when the handle broke, leaving Macy's head unrecognizable. Jimmy spat on Macy and accused her and John of killing him and forging his name on the divorce papers, allowing them to get married soon after his disappearance. "Dad, is that you?" Jimmy asked. After leaving his body, Jimmy saw his dad's spirit appear in front of him. "Jimmy," the spirit said, "I'm not your biological father. I found out 16 years ago that I'm infertile and cannot have children. John is your real father." Jimmy was shocked. He realized that he had murdered his own father and began screaming hysterically in his mind. He turned on all the gas stove burners and let the gas fill the room for a couple of hours before igniting his lighter. The resulting explosion destroyed the house and all the houses within a 3-block radius. Within minutes, the fire had spread to the entire town. News came out that the town had suffered heavy financial losses and many lives were lost.